Jackson trying to escape and run for it, and he's got it and more. Lamar Jackson down the sideline. Will they give it to him? They will. Touchdown, Baltimore.
And with 1:17 left to play on Wild Card Weekend, the Hayes in the barn.
Oh my God! I wish you guys could. I wish we had a camera in here so you could see what we're doing. We're just a bunch of clowns in here.
How much fun is that?
All right, welcome on back to another edition of the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. It is Tuesday, August 31st, end of August here. We're heading into September. Will somebody wake me up when September ends?
That Chipotle off East Fort Ave and Lawrence Street and Be More customer service is always so trash, fam. LOL.
Shout out to Deshaun Elliott and Banks, who have both seemed to taken up that mantle and railed against that location more than once. I just feel like it's a general systemic problem with Chipotle right now. If I'm going to call anyone out, I'm going to have to call Chipotle out. I feel like they're struggling these days.
I don't know. That specific Nook, the McDonald's there, worst of all time. One of my buddies had a very spoiled temper tantrum and screamed at the drive-thru lady one time, and she said back, "I'm sorry, I'm the only one here right now. Everyone I hire quits after 2 weeks."
Which is kind of sick. That's like sort of the bad boy McDonald's of Baltimore.
Exactly. BBB.
Well, my name is Jake Luke. I'm joined on my screen by Spencer Nathaniel Schultz, rocking his best Tony Soprano Camp Fowler shirt here. And Vasily Larico is probably the closest thing to Tony Soprano in the Baltimore Beatdown family. How's it?
Doing great. I agree with that statement.
Which, for all the positives and negatives of that. So, gentlemen, we're hopping in here tonight, getting the three-man weave going for what is we were just saying before we got going here is a very fun time of the year. It is the roster cut down for the Ravens, for teams across the league, and that sort of also coincides with fantasy football. So there's a lot of different things going on. This is just Voss absolutely just lives for this time. I can just feel it coursing through his veins. So we wanted to get him on to talk about all this kind of stuff, but there's been some other events that have taken place in the Ravens news sphere. Obviously, the massive, just huge win over the Washington football team on Saturday night. I mean, just talk about like program defining, like goosebump inducing stuff to get a real big win like that to continue the streak for John Harbaugh was, a little bit of a pyrrhic victory with the torn ACL to second year running back J.K. Dobbins.
It is what it is. It happened. Harbaugh, I think, spoke quite well about it today. He was asked generally, what do you think about the conversation around playing starters at his press conference today, where he had just announced Dobbins out for the year with the ACL. And he said, I think it's a good conversation. And he said, a lot of teams play the starters more than we do, and a lot of teams don't play their starters at all. And we're on probably the end this year towards not playing them at all, but we played them. And he said back in 2016, Washington Post made an article, and he basically said, it was after Ben Watson and I believe Kenneth Dixon both got hurt in the same game. And he said, we need to figure something out. If I could do away with preseason, I would. Then the Ravens win 20 straight games, hilariously, which creates this fun narrative of like Harbaugh puts the starters in because he wants to win. Those games aren't won in the first quarter with the starters. They're won with the try-hard effort in the fourth quarter by the bubble and cut guys.
Harbaugh's heroes, I've been coining them recently.
Exactly. So it sucks. You feel for J.K. Dobbins. He's a dynamic, explosive player. Vaz has already crunched the numbers to figure out that it was completely irrelevant that he tore his ACL.
Right.
And again, this is the second hindsight for you, Vaz, where hindsight has been 2020. The first one, Vaz played with the idea of Orlando Brown being the guy you re-sign over Stanley, see if you can get 2 firsts for Stanley. And then the second was basically, why the hell did they draft J.K. Dobbins in the second round? You have Gus Edwards, and now you have Tyson Williams.
I mean, the wheels are always turning with the guy. You got to at least grant him that.
You gotta play the angles, man. You can't do. I'm just contrarian by nature. I think the loss of J.K. hurts. You lose some explosiveness, some big playability, and you also lose some versatility. Not that the other guys can't do what he did, but he could do everything, and you kind of keep the defense on their toes a little bit more than you can now. That being said, pretty much any running back that's been beside Lamar Jackson since he took over as starter has averaged about 5 yards a carry. Kenneth Dixon, obviously Gus Edwards for 3 years, and Justice Hill even, he puts up numbers. Mark Ingram had the good first year last year. I don't know if he lost a step. I don't know if they were telegraphing it. But
I think both. I think both.
You're going to lose, half a yard per carry maybe. What's that average out to in a year? Couple hundred yards. So it's a loss, but it's certainly not. If you could afford a loss anywhere, I think that's the place where they could afford it.
Right. We hate to say that. And obviously you put it well, Vaz, JK, big playability, the versatility. You love to have him. He's a matchup problem. He keeps Gus fresh, and it does really stink to lose him. You feel awful for the guy. We wish him the best. We don't want to be too vain here, but at the same time, one of the positions where, and especially like you said, in this Ravens offense, it takes some wind out of your sail, but the sail's going to keep on moving. The ship's going to keep going. So it stinks. You could see the frustration on John Harbaugh's face as soon as it happened. They're going to miss him, and hopefully it's kind of like a, win one for JK situation, but unfortunate, not a dagger.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely one of those things where you would certainly prefer to have him. He's just kind of that a force multiplier kind of in his own way of like, yeah, it's a little bit of a luxury. And we said that, I think, even at the time. And I think that kind of bore itself out over the course of last season where, they weren't even using him in the first half of the year. And people were like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you drafted this guy and you're not even going to use him. He's a running back. There's a little bit of a short shelf life with these guys. What are they doing? And then he kind of comes back in right when they need him. He's sort of the prince that was promised down the stretch last year and proved himself to be a really dynamic piece of that offense. And sort of bringing, I don't know, like what is, rush points added were, I think it was like 20 for the year, but he wound up being, number 1 in overall shotgun carry rate, I think. So, just kind of interesting in the way that they knew exactly what they wanted to do with him last year. I think they had even more plans for him this year to incorporate him in new dynamic ways. So it does hurt in that regard. I hope there's no more structural damage than just the ACL. There was talk of LCL, PCL, that kind of stuff being involved, which I don't know when we're supposed to hear more about that, but you definitely don't want any more structural damage for a running back and a guy of his stature to that knee. But, you do move forward. And like we've been saying, I think privately in the chat, pretty much since this happened, I think they're in good hands with Gus Edwards. And I did a little write-up on Tyson Williams and how he could be a good, I wouldn't say replacement, but sort of a reasonable facsimile for what they can do with Dobbins to begin with.
Well said, for sure. And Dobbins, as Vaz said, the expected rushing yards per carry in the Ravens offense is the highest in the NFL. So you can put in an average running back and they're probably going to average 4.5 yards a carry, which ranks in the top 20 in the NFL, especially given volume. I think the one thing is that Gus Edwards' tread is going to be tested. He, isn't going to have the benefit maybe of being kept fresh by Dobbins and able to pick and choose and kind of keep that. It's like being able to switch between front wheel drive and then going into all wheel drive with both of them when you need it. I don't know no better way to put it. I'm sure there is, but you're going to ask Gus Edwards to really take a lot of wear and tear early. But hey, he's a 235, 240 pound back that's built like a brick shit house. So at the end of the day, they're going to have to feed Gus. And it's an interesting thought experiment on seeing what he's able to do with the heavier workload. So, it's not what you want, but there's some fascinating aspects as a butterfly effect, if you will, off of it. And I'm not excited to see what happens, but I'm curious.
Yeah, it's fortunately running back. There's quite a few free agents, at least named free agents available right now. There will be more that'll come available tomorrow at 4 p.m. And that's a position where you can find a contributor off the street if you need one, as compared to, God forbid, if Ronnie Stanley was the guy that got hurt, or Marlon Humphrey, or one of the other top players. But just a tough training camp all the way around for the Ravens.
There's been this dark cloud over it.
The injuries, the COVID list, and they're banged up. We don't know how banged up a lot of these guys are. I think we're going to get into it when we do this breakdown here. But I'm glad that camp is about to close and they can move past this period.
Yeah, definitely. And it is going to be interesting to see what happens with Gus to that first point there. It was he was that closer. He played maybe the most unique role for a running back in the NFL, where he wasn't this like scat back or like a change of pace back. He was kind of like a throwback sort of power back type guy where they would bring him in to just, he wouldn't see the field much in the first half. And then late third quarter, fourth quarter, when you got a lead, you just bring him in and he just chews up yards and basically wins you games. So it's going to be interesting to see him maybe in a little bit of a reverse capacity there. I'd be interested to see what Williams and maybe Justice Hill, if it's going to be him making the roster here, as we'll discuss, if they're going to be kind of taking that JK role where they are sort of relied upon in the first half at the running back position, then they do bring in Gus as that closer. There's a lot of permutation to consider with it all, but I guess we're going to be seeing in a couple of weeks in week one, but I guess we have been alluding to it that cut down day is pretty much here, and we have had some coming through and some other moves coming through. So I got Jeff Zrebick's Twitter pulled up here, who has been all over this, and he always is. So he's always on top of it. Follow him at Jeff Zrebick. That is Zrebiec. If you're not, I'm guessing you already are, of course, if you're listening to this. But yeah, he's staying on top of this stuff. So yeah, Nick Boyle. Let's go through these. So I guess we can start with Nick Boyle, Spenny.
Nick Boyle is taken off the PUP, and that means he's probably either going to be put on IR or I know that the goal has always been for him to be ready for week one. And I don't want to entirely rule that out yet, but I'd say that's a less likely situation.
Harbs alluded to him not being ready for week one.
Right.
So I tend to think he's going to be on IR because it's a 3-week IR, so he can be back relatively soon.
So I might have to do some rejiggering with my my spreadsheet here, but regardless, you do have Jeff here saying Boyle not being ready for week one is a good sign for Eric Tomlinson's roster chances, who is a blocking tight end that they have, and he says as a vested vet, Tomlinson could also be a wink cut with agreement to re-sign on Thursday. It seems highly unlikely Ravens would go without a blocking tight end in week one. So a lot of permutations, to use that word again, at the tight end position right now.
Spot on, bang on. I think Ben Mason, has taken snaps there, and it feels like Ricard. It's either that you want Tomlinson back, and I think they do, but you might like to take your chances with Ricard playing a lot more tight end snaps. He probably has prepared. I think that's a scenario that you run through right now through training camp of, hey, Boyle's probably going to miss time. We have Mason. Ricard took those snaps last year. We can up that. Rely on Mark Andrews to hair more as a blocker. And, hey, Ben Mason can probably go play 3-5 snaps at tight end if you want in line and get some stuff done. So it's not a huge deal either way, I want to say, but I think they like Eric Tomlinson. I think they see him as that quadruple A guy. They can come in and give you snaps. He did it last year. He has a full offseason now. He makes a nice little diving catch in the back of the end zone, of course, puts a little cherry on top in Washington. Just adds a little sprinkle, a little sauce on there to say, hey, I'm here. I can use these two paws of mine to reel in a pass from time to time. And you don't hate the guy. I have no issues with Eric Tomlinson being on the roster, and I think that there's no way that the Ravens don't want him on the practice squad.
I've been very impressed with Tomlinson in the preseason. I was impressed with him last year blocking. I mean, when they brought him in as the blocking tight end, that's when the running game finally got back on track. So I do prefer him over Mason. It's funny how we're sitting here talking about IR and how long players are going to be and who's a vested veteran. And Ravens fans are always talking about comp picks and the salary cap. I find it hard to believe that many other fan bases are this plugged into the nitty gritty of the roster manipulation. And it's pretty funny to me, but that's how the team operates. So why shouldn't we?
Yeah, I think it kind of makes the fan base almost a little bit smarter in that regard, and I think that's pretty fun. We do have our fair share of dummies, just as any fan base does, but I love how into the weeds we do tend to get with this stuff. I think it's a good reflection on the front office and a good reflection on the fan base, but I guess that is all we've got for tight end, which obviously we'll be diving more into it. But then next tweet from Jeff, with Marquise Brown returning to practice, which he just did today after a couple weeks. Sounds like the Ravens cut a few wide receivers as part of their initial roster moves. Devin Gray, Siasi Mariner, and Deion Kane among their moves today per source. There could be a few other cuts, although Ravens will do heavy roster lifting tomorrow. So then he goes on to kind of explain all of that, and then also sort of throws it in there that they threw J.K. Dobbins on the season-ending IR, so he's out yet, and they terminated the contract of offensive tackle / guard Michael Schofield.
Bingo. So we're doing receiver now?
So I was just kind of
we're just going through the news.
I was just still going through the news.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. So all that Schofield is gone, Deion Kane gone. Just sort of these back into the wide receiver room guys that probably weren't going to make it. Then they had a visit with Blake Gallagher apparently recently, who was a inside linebacker. So I don't know if they're going to be looking to add a depth piece there, but
Minnesota? No,
I think Texans maybe. Because Aaron Wilson tweeted it, and he's down
Northwestern. Okay, that name does not even really ring a bell for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I didn't know who it was either, but Jeff actually quote tweeted it and said Gallagher tried out with the Ravens at the rookie minicamp. Could be an eventual practice squad signing. Ravens only have 4 inside linebackers on roster, and they're all projected to make team. So they'll want to sign an inside linebacker to a practice squad. So that's just probably a practice squad move, and maybe kind of all we need to talk about before getting into the position groups. Unless you guys got anything else on all that.
I think Kane played pretty well, but with the amount of young talent they have, it just didn't quite make sense to keep him. Schofield, I thought, played his way onto the bubble after the second preseason game and played his way off the team in the third preseason game.
Yeah, Kane was an interesting one, and he was a guy who I think a lot of people liked as a dude who, coming out of Clemson, some people saw as maybe promising as like a diamond in the rough type guy. But yeah, it just didn't seem like it was going to be in the cards for him after the rest of the offseason moves played out, because he was a very early signing. And he was one of those moves actually where people were like mocking it at the time, like, oh, this is the big wide receiver move, just like the Josh Oliver, this is the big move, eh? Well, let's all just kind of relax here. Are you vaping right now?
Yeah. Is that okay? Is that allowed?
No, that's totally fine. I was caught off guard because like I was like half looking at my spreadsheet, and I looked out, I could see you like puffing a fat cloud, which it's very much welcome on these airwaves. But yeah, I guess we can jump into it, boys. If you're ready, I've got my sheet pulled up here. I don't know if you guys have yours, but I guess we can get into some roster 53-man cut down talk.
To quote Dewey Cox, let's duet.
Let's do it. So quarterback, there's 2 options here, and they're both going to 100% make the team. It's Lamar Jackson. It's Tyler Huntley. Any words on quarterback from you, Voss?
Yeah, I was listening to, I think it was Warren Sharp yesterday or today, saying that the Ravens had one of the worst or the worst backup quarterback situations in the NFL. I disagree with that. I think Snoop Huntley has played pretty darn well. I think he's a seamless fit. The question is, and I guess it's not much of a question, but Trace Unitas did practice today. So they don't have to IR him, which I guess saves some cap space or injury waive him. But we think he makes it to the P squad, or you're just cutting bait and saying let's get a mobile quarterback in the draft next year.
For me, I wrote him down as P squad and protected because it's going to be behooving them to, and as much as we talk about play styles not mattering with, quarterbacks potentially getting hurt. I mean, Lamar is a mobile quarterback. It's probably good to have 3 quarterbacks in the picture, even not with a mobile quarterback, if you have the capacity to do so. And with the practice squad protections, I think if you have a little handshake deal with Trace, we'll put you on the practice squad, we'll protect you, give you another year to kind of develop here while you also come back from this back injury. All that combined with the fact that Lamar's not going to be getting the vaccine, like we can pretty much resign ourselves to that at this point. Like there's some uncertainty with the quarterback position. And Jackson, if I had my druthers, he'd play all 17 games. I'm hoping that's going to be the case, but you got to be prepared for the fact that he's not, whether it's hurt, whether it's COVID, whether it's something, of that nature. I think having Trace in the picture as a protected practice squad player would be what I would do. So that's what I wrote down. Not sure how it's going to shake out, but as of my sheet, I have Lamar Jackson starter, Tyler Huntley number 2, Trace McSorley protected practice squad quarterback.
Just for clarity, so they have to, I believe, clear waivers initially on Tuesday, and then on Thursday they can go in the practice squad, but somebody could claim them in that 48-hour window.
In that sense, I'm fine exposing him to waivers. Right. We love Trace here. Obviously, we've had a lot of fun with all that, and it actually, it came to, it came to its zenith recently when I met him outside of a Chipotle, and we had a few nice words and a fist bump and a selfie. So that was great, and we love Trace. But I'm fine exposing him to waivers. Honestly, I don't think anyone's going to be in any rush to pick him up anyway. So I'd say let's go ahead and do that. And there's plenty of options out there on the quarterback market if you need it anyway.
I feel like his back injury is kind of a load of baloney. I don't know how you hurt your back and then go play in a game after. I don't know. Fishy, I think he's a practice squad player. I don't think anyone's looking to take him and put him on their 53 in week 1. So take that for what you want. But yeah, I think it's just Jackson and Huntley. Huntley, to me, just 2 sentences. Was a little erratic first 2 weeks, but we saw him settle in, step up in the pocket, put plenty of touch on the ball, spray the ball around the field, had 3, I'm going to say 3 dimes. And I don't like to throw a dime around lightly. Speaking of Trent Dilfer, get me riled up. I'll scream in a kid's face over a dime.
Don't
just
come
like
through the
Trent
screen
Dilfer.
here and like grab me by the collarbone and start, giving me the business.
That's a dime. But he had a couple really beautiful throws, 2 to Deion Kane that he couldn't bring in. Maybe that's why he is no longer in consideration and one of the first exposed. So I thought Huntley played extremely well. And that was a nice game for him to maybe settle in and maybe gives you a glimpse into, knock on wood, if he has to play 3, 4, 5, 10 games, probably is going to be pretty frantic for a couple games. And maybe he's able to settle in and give you some quality games. And hey, if you need him for a month, maybe he's able to go 2-2, something like that. Trace to practice squad, I think is pretty likely. And Huntley he's an okay backup. Yeah, he's got some ability to run and move and throw on the run and things like that. So I don't hate Tyler Huntley at all.
Yeah, neither do I. I think I had plenty to say about sort of his touch or lack thereof in the first 2 games. It was just kind of an ugly watch. And I think it was just more symptomatic of the entire offense. And we talked about them being frantic at times during the regular season and even the playoffs last year. It still looked kind of frantic, but I don't totally blame them because they just didn't have nearly the amount of starters out there that they would have liked. And this is kind of not really going to be close to the final product of what we're going to see in week 1, hopefully. So I wasn't too worried about that. And then he goes out there against Washington and has probably the performance of his career. So he's going to be sticking around as the QB2, and I don't have nearly as much qualms about it as maybe I would have had a few weeks ago.
If Lamar has a close contact, miss a game, I think, depending on the opponent, obviously, but I think Huntley can rack up a W potentially.
Yeah, I mean, like they really should have won a game with Trace like in the second half last season. And like, I mean, you can do that. You can probably, pull something out with Huntley if you have to. And I'd be intrigued to kind of see that if that were to be the case. I'm obviously not hoping for it, but I'd be relatively comfortable. So running back, I wrote down Gus Edwards as the starter, Tyson Williams as the number 2, and Justice Hill as the number 3. Tenure might have Justice Hill as the number 2 or whatever that might be, but it does seem like there is, I wouldn't say bad blood, but it does seem like the coaching staff is maybe a little frustrated with him in some respects. But it does sound like his job was saved by the J.K. Dobbins injury. And I got him coming back here as running back number 3. And then hopefully getting Nate McCrary onto the practice squad.
Boom. Pat Ricard, throw him on the end of it. He's the fullback. We'll put him in the running back room.
I had fullback in its own category, but yeah.
Yeah, I concur with that. Hill still hasn't returned to my knowledge. So I guess there is some ambiguity if he will be ready for week 1. Could he potentially be an IR, short-term IR candidate? I suppose. And I'd also keep an eye out to see who's released tomorrow. But those are the 3. I think Tyson's got some juice. He can make some plays in this scheme.
Yeah, definitely. And there's been some names bandied about. You got Todd Gurley on the open market, guys like Adrian Peterson even on the open market. I've seen people talking about, which would be an interesting one. And then other
Le'Veon Bell.
Le'Veon.
My buddy sent me that today. My buddy, yeah.
Yeah, well, I actually got plenty of that when I tweeted about Gurley, and then I wrote the Williams article, and people were kind of coming at me with the Le'Veon Bell thing. And listen, whatever. It just doesn't really sound like it's all there, like attitude-wise with Bell at this point. So probably would be a no for me, but I guess we'll see what happens in that regard. But yeah, I think they're good with the 3 guys that they have. Sounded like Harbs was saying as much at the press conference today. But you also can't really take the Ravens at their word at this point.
I think that there's probably 3 rooms where I have a high likelihood of a waiver player or veteran being added. And those three are going to be running back, offensive line, and linebacker. I also wouldn't be shocked by defensive line. I'll put that in the second tier. So I think that, I'm going to put 53 players out there, and I'm going to, for the sake of the exercise at the end, remove one and say that there's going to be a waiver player that gets put on the 53. Or just a signing. A guy like, Bendarek McKinney just comes available. Hey, you need a veteran linebacker like LJ Fort maybe. If that's the best of the bunch between running back, offensive line, and linebacker, maybe you can go add him. So that's an interesting situation to watch for. But yeah, at this point, I think that's what they roll with, unless they're able to make some hay on the waiver wire and get someone that would be considered an upgrade to Justice Hill. Maybe someone who has a explosive skill set, adds a little bit more speed and receiving ability to kind of mirror what Justice Hill does and maybe be a little bit more frisky in that category.
For sure. So had Pat Ricard in his own category at fullback, but that moves us on to tight end, where I've got.
So everybody's agreed that we're pushing Mason to the practice squad.
I have him at tight end.
I've got Mason at tight end. Yeah. So moving to tight end, I got Mark Andrews 1. Obviously, I have Eric Tomlinson with an asterisk at 2, Josh Oliver 3, Ben Mason 4, and Nick Boyle obviously out of the picture, but to return for Tomlinson when it's his time.
I've got Andrews, Boyle, Oliver, Mason, and we'll see what happens with Boyle. I think, obviously, Tomlinson's probably going to be P squad, if not on the opening day roster, if Boyle is put on the IR.
So I do not have Mason. I think he's going to go on P squad. There's about 6 or 8 teams that roster a fullback, and they already have fullbacks. So, and worst comes to worst, you can get a fullback next year because a lot of college teams use fullbacks. So I don't have Mason making it. I don't think he quite adds enough. I prefer Tomlinson to him once Boyle is put on IR. And also just want to mention, I think Tony Poljan is a nice practice squad option.
So is that the Voss projection? Because I'm going off of what I think they're going to do.
That's both.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen a couple other people plugged in. Even Eisenberg didn't have Mason, I believe.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I was just curious because the way you phrased it. So we're good on tight end there. Poljan, I actually do think is probably a little bit. I don't know if I'd say slept on, but a lot of people do seem to like him as an intriguing option. So maybe we'll see him on the P squad. Anything more on tight end?
There's no fucking way they're not putting Ben Mason on the active roster. He plays special teams. I think
they love him. I think
he is John Harbaugh's cake, and I think that he can't eat the cake. So to speak, but I think you can't have him and Levine. And I think you have no reason to keep Levine. We'll get into that when we get to the safety DB room. But Ben Mason is a Harbaugh guy. Literally, he comes from Jim Harbaugh and has graduated to John Harbaugh. They drafted him. Harbaugh is going to stick his neck out, slam the table. He probably shaves Ben Mason's freaking mohawk himself at this point. I'm very confident Ben Mason is going to make the 53. I think they like him. I think they're in the position where Ricard can eat some of those Boyle snaps in line as the true Y, and Mason can then be the fullback. I think we see Mason get 5 to 10 snaps in Las Vegas.
All right, we'll see. I feel pretty confident, but I think Harbaugh is going to say, go to DeCosta and say we have to keep him. DeCosta is going to say maybe if you didn't play Dobbins, you'd have a little more leverage.
Well played, EDC. Well played.
Very true.
And then he takes a swig of his Coca-Cola and a bite of his Dunkin' Donut.
Yeah, so we got so I mean that's the Mason discussion. I do think they're going to hang out. I think they I just think they like him a lot. Some of the run that he was getting, some of the plays that he was making in the preseason, I think they like some of the blocks that he threw. It just feels like they just fucking can't help themselves. And this is just one of those guys that they can't help themselves on. Wide receiver, left to right, I have Marquise Brown 1, Sammy Watkins 2, Rashad Bateman 3, Devin Duvernay 4, James Prochet 5, Tylan Wallace 6, Miles Boykin on the outside looking in.
I have the exact same list. I think that Bateman is an IR, and you roll with those 5. I think that Miles Boykin gets put on waivers. I think he gets claimed very quickly. I feel like the Ravens are going to make Boykin and Victor like 358, 359 cuts. Like they're going to do it at the last minute they can put Boykin and Victor on waivers. They will. And that's why you're seeing them offer up Kane early and offer up some other guys. Maybe we see Jalen Moore offered up a couple hours early. They want to try to retain one of Victor and Boykin is my inkling.
So I have 7 wideouts, and I have Boykin making the team and then hitting IR immediately along with Bateman. I think for as injured as this wide receiver core is, it would be nice to have a player you can call on in midseason. We still don't know what the hell's going on with Sammy Watkins. Hollywood did return today, but Sammy, we don't know. So I guess that's our biggest difference so far. I have Boykin. You guys have Mason. I think he has more value than Mason, and I think around the league. So at worst, I actually think they might be able to sneak Prochet onto the P squad just because wide receiver. I know Jake talks about that a lot, how deep wide receiver is around the league. And then you definitely want to have somebody on the practice squad. I prefer Jalen Moore, but they have a couple nice options there.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, like if this were me, I would keep Miles Boykin over Ben Mason.
Fair enough.
Offensive line. I got Ronnie Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm putting Cologne on P squad if I can, and I'm putting Ely on P squad if I can, and I think that sums out my 9.
I think, yeah. So for me, I did Ronnie Stanley left tackle. Starting at left guard, I got Ben Powers right now. Ben Cleveland behind him. Starting at center, you got Bradley Bozeman. I had Cologne on the 53 as a backup center. At right guard, I got Kevin Zeitler, Makari behind him. He's listed as a right guard. And then Al Villanueva and Tyree Phillips at right tackle. So I got 9.
I have 9, but I have Ely making the team. I think they've been trying to hide him a little bit. I think he's played too well to be hidden, and he also plays tackle. And they've had a couple years now where they let go of a tackle thinking he would make it through to the P squad, and he didn't. So that's going to leave the final battle between Makari and Cologne for the 9th spot. And I honestly don't know which way they're going to go because essentially who's the backup center? And Makari has more experience. But if there is one kind of eyebrow-raising cut tomorrow, I think it might be Makari.
Yeah, I think that's probably why I hung on to Makari is that versatility.
So to me, I'm looking through the lens here. I have very little insight, and I'm looking through the lens of NFL GMs. We give them too much credit. And to me, that says that Ben Bredesen, I think the final 3 spots are between Bredesen, Cologne, and Makari, and I think they keep 2. I think Bredesen was a 4th-round pick, and drafted guys, especially, not a 7th-round guy, they're always going to get circulated first. If it's a 1st-round guy, they're going to get 6 chances. Josh Rosen's going to play for another 3 years. Kevin White's been signed 50 times. We're talking about a 4th-round guy who hasn't really played much, but anyway, you get the point. Then Makari, another UDFA, but has plenty of starts to his name. So he's going to be intriguing. He has versatility. That's going to be intriguing. Cologne, I actually might like the best of these 3 overall, in terms of being a viable option on the offensive line. But UDFA, hasn't played a ton, not a ton of buzz around him. No one really mentions his name. I think you can sneak him onto the practice squad.
To me, it's kind of the positional value conversation. Guards are just the easiest to find. Most tackles can kick into guard in a pinch, and if you're a decent tackle, you're probably a pretty good guard. So I don't have Bredesen. It wouldn't surprise me. I guess we'll see how it shakes out. Just another note, Juwan James is on the non-football injury list. He can be activated in week 9.
Bingo.
They don't have to reserve a spot for him. They just keep him on that list.
I think that's a tough situation. I think generally the consensus on him is a little higher than it might end up resulting in, and I think the Ravens took a flyer, and it's a tough flyer to take. But I would rather have taken the flyer than not at all.
Any last thoughts on offense before we switch over?
So I guess that leaves me with 25 on offense, and I guess notably Vaz had Boykin, and Jake and I had Mason, and then it was the offensive line discussion we just had.
Yeah, I had 25 as well. I think we were pretty much in lockstep on our picks, so that makes sense. But yeah, I guess we can switch over to defense then. First up, defensive tackle, Calais Campbell, Justin Matabike for me.
Just 2? Oh, you're doing it by tackle.
No, it's defensive tackle. So let me actually, I can just pull this up.
Let's call it defensive line.
Yeah. Defensive
let's go that
line.
way. So let's go Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams, Derek Wolfe, Justin Madubuike, and Broderick Washington. I'm going to go ahead and guess Vaz. That is your 5. I'm stuck between, I think there's a heavy possibility that either Ellis or McPhee or possibly both, considering they have very low guaranteed money, can be cut and re-signed. I don't think McPhee wants to go anywhere. If they were like, hey, Purnell, we'll give you an extra $800,000 in another veteran minimum to bring you back in. Or I guess it would be you get an extra $200,000 or 167, whatever. I'm confusing myself. But hey, we'll give you an extra couple of $100,000. We're going to cut you, bring you back. You'd be like, okay. Ellis may be the same thing. So I'm going to go with I'll go Team Vaz here, which I think Vaz is going to do, and go 5. I think they kick Ellis out. I don't think they keep Crawford. I think they end up bringing Ellis back and keeping Crawford on the P squad, and they have the 5. Maybe even into week 1, they have the 5 on the active roster that are Campbell, Williams, Wolfe, Madubuike, and Washington.
Yeah, so I had the 5. I had Campbell, Williams, and Wolfe starting at DT, NT, and DE, and then Madubuike at DT behind Campbell, and Washington at DN behind Derek Wolfe. And I did have them just kind of cutting bait with Ellis. They do seem to like him. To your point, he's kind of like he's just good at what he does, even if it's not like all that valuable in some people's eyes. But I do kind of see them moving on. And I only went with the 5.
Yeah, this is a conversation we were discussing on the Slack months ago, Spenny. I remember 5 DL. You guys said the same 5 that I do. I think they can bring Jelly back later in the season when they need to, and also probably get Crawford to the practice squad. If not, they can find a nose tackle on the street if they really need one. We've seen it. They don't play very much base at all. I think there's there's 1.9 defensive linemen on the field per snap last year, something along those lines. And just another note, they don't play the Browns until week 12. They do play the Vikings. They do play another team, a heavy run team, but I think they can get by to start the season with the 5 right now.
I think the Raiders, let's look at the schedule real quick, just for a quick exercise on who runs the ball. The Raiders run the ball. I think the Chiefs sneakily are going to run the ball slightly more, but still wouldn't say they run the ball. I think the Lions are going to run the ball. I think the Broncos are going to run the ball. I think the Colts are going to run the ball. Vikings, Bears, and then there you go, Browns. So I think there are some teams that run the ball. I think the only ones that scare you are probably maybe the Broncos a little bit, the Vikings, and then finally the Browns. So you definitely have a point there. But it's tough trying to predict these whole who's going to wink and nod and if it's even worth it to them. And it depends on how many guys. But I did mention previously, I think that's one of the 3 positions that I would absolutely see them bringing in someone else. And like Jake said, I think that the Ravens, number one, I think the Ravens think highly of Justin Ellis and his ability to simply execute his assignment with consistency. And number 2, I think that the biggest discrepancy, if you were to ask maybe a defensive coach, especially one that runs, a 0 or 1 tech versus the analytics guru of X website, I would say the biggest discrepancy in value would be between a nose tackle for an analytics person seeking a run stuffing nose tackle as an absolute 0, and a defensive, line coach or a defensive coordinator highly valuing having a 2-gapping nose tackle and then a backup. So I think that's an interesting kind of food for thought overall. And I do think that the Ravens value Ellis, and I would be surprised to see him completely cut ties with and just gone. I think he is playing in games for the Ravens at some point this year. Yeah,
it feels like when you get to like late November, early December, there's just all this churn with the roster, and a lot of it does seem to occur along the defensive line. So to that sort of idea, I could definitely see him within the picture for the near future, but just not on the opening 53. Anything more on the defensive line?
No, you guys are right about Jelly Ellis. They gave him more guaranteed money in the offseason than most people are expecting, and they usually carry 6.
What's his guaranteed money?
I don't recall at the top of my head, but I know it was a little bit more than most people were expecting. It's just tough because they have a lot of talented young guys upcoming, and you want to try to find spots for them because it seems like there's a higher likelihood that somebody's going to poach those guys.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have too, and it's one that I think maybe like during Ozzy's tenure, you might be a little bit more inclined to keep a jelly around, but I feel like EDC would maybe prioritize the future a little bit more.
So I'm just going to rattle off some guaranteed money. It's Justin Ellis, $262,000, McPhee, $312,000, Levine, $200,000, Tomlinson, $100,000. So they already parted with $100,000 there on Tomlinson, and of those, McPhee does have the highest. So I think that Levine and Ellis are next in line, strictly by number of dollars, to be the wink the nod deal guys.
I mean, we're almost projecting like what's the roster going to be on Tuesday and what's the roster going to be, 10 days from now. But
exactly.
It's with these gymnastics the Ravens like to do, it's interesting.
Yeah, and all we can really do at this point is the 53, so that's what we're doing. But we'll certainly throw out the permutations as we see them as well. So that's something to keep an eye on, not only at this position but with others. And speaking of others, we can go into the linebacking core now, if you guys are ready. I had 6. Pernell McPhee starting at rush, Justin Houston behind him, Jalen Ferguson, number 3. Middle linebacker, I've got Patrick Queen, Christian Welch behind him, and then weak side linebacker, Malik Harrison.
I'm confused here.
Outside backers.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason, I thought I heard Patrick Queen.
So so what I did was, let me pull it up. So the way they list the depth chart, they do Mike, Will,
So you don't have board on?
No, so I got rid of board. So I did, so here's my full group. So I did rush, Pernell McPhee, Justin Houston, Jalen Ferguson. Obviously, that's not totally reflective of how it's going to shake out snap count wise, but that's just how they have them listed on their site. So Pernell McPhee, Justin Houston, Jalen Ferguson at rush, Mike linebacker, Patrick Queen, Christian Welch, Will, Malik Harrison, Sam, Tyus Bowser, Odafe Owe, Dalen Hayes.
So I have board making the team. So that would give them a 2 deep at both inside backer spots, and with all the special teams guys they've already cut or have been injured, I think they want to keep board, overpaid or not. And outside backer, I'm the biggest Pernell McPhee fan, or one of them around. One of my favorite players. I think he is the wink nod guy for sure. So I had to make room. So I figured that they're going to, since he is a vested veteran, they're going to let him go tomorrow and then re-sign him on Thursday once they move Boykin and Bateman to IR.
I think that the conversations that are going on are probably between Ferguson and then Crawford and Ellis there. And I don't know. It's tough. I left Ferguson off, but I kind of feel stupid because it just seems like they've put in too much work. And if there is a sunk cost, it is developmental effort put into Ferguson. And I think that they have spoken highly. I think we've seen it on the field and we've seen it in the press conferences. And sure, it could be smoke. They could be, trying to increase trade value or get somebody to bite a la Sean Wade or, Corey Vedvik, whatever. But it's tough. I mean, ideally, I guess, is it worth it for a couple $100,000 to keep Ferguson? I think the answer is yeah. The other guy to watch out for, just in terms of making it onto the team at some point this year, is Chris Smith. I think he's played well. He's done a good job. I think they like his versatility, being able to rush out of a 5 technique and have his hand in the dirt and things like that. So I'm going to go with Houston, Owe, Bowser, Hayes, and then I'll just go with they cut McPhee, bring in Ferguson, do the IRs, and then bring him back. So we'll go with 5 tentatively, and they end up bringing McPhee back to make 6.
Yeah, to your point, literally right before we got going, I had Ellis on the final roster and I had Ferguson on the outside looking in, and I was like, well, I think they'll prioritize the youth there and the development they've at least tried to get going.
And it's a nice rotation with Ferguson and Hayes, who looks like a draft day steal at this point. I think Ferguson has some versatility to play on the defensive line if you need him there in a pinch. I think, they seem to really like him. So it's kind of funny if you think about it. Before the draft, outside linebacker was one of the biggest weaknesses on the team, and now it has the potential to be one of the biggest strengths.
They have a really nice rotation between Houston being a savvy pass rusher, Bowser's coverage ability and general versatility, Away's speed, Hayes kind of just solid play, and then McPhee setting the edge, and Ferguson just seems like he's getting more disruptive as time goes on, and he can be a disruptive force. So I think he is worth keeping in the end, and I think we see McPhee cut, Ferguson kept.
For sure. And I did get a little mixed up there. So that's our outside linebackers. Inside linebackers, to your point, I had Patrick Queen, Malik Harrison, Christian Welch. Voss, it sounded like you went with Chris Board there.
I did. I had it on board. Originally, I thought Welsh could be cut and then resigned, but Spencer reminded me he would have to clear waivers because he's a second-year player. So I do have all four. I wouldn't be surprised if they looked for a linebacker that was cut from another team to take one of those spots. I think I saw Bernardrick McKinney was cut today.
Yep.
But I don't know what he wants to – and he's probably looking to start. He's probably going to cost a lot of money. But linebackers get cut. It's not a premium position, so that's a place to keep an eye on.
I'm pretty positive they don't. They have a linebacker in Las Vegas that they don't currently have. I think that it's going to be Queen, Harrison, Board, and someone else. And I think Welch is going to be someone they put on waivers. So I'm just going to go with those three and say that they get someone else.
Fair enough. Yeah, and maybe I'd even be taking the same approach there. So I guess we'll see what happens in that regard. That's where the LJ Fort injury kind of throws a wrench into things. But is that all we got on the backers?
Yes.
Cornerback. So left corner, I got Marcus Peters, Jimmy Smith, Nigel Warrior. Jimmy Smith, it sounds like progressing, but not as well as they initially thought per John Harbaugh. So hopefully he's going to be back practicing, I think, next week, he said. But we'll see what happens with that timeline. Right cornerback, I got Marlon Humphrey, Tavon Young, Anthony Averett.
I went deep at corner. Real quick on Jimmy, though. Do you put Jimmy on IR? It's been a month. Would you rather have just put everybody on IR and just come out firing in week 6? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because Jimmy hasn't practiced in a month. We know he's injury prone. I think they did
You've
that.
got Averett.
Right. So anyway, at corner, I have 7 corners making the team. I have Marlowe, Peters, Jimmy making the team, and then hitting IR, Tavon Young, Anthony Averett, Ardarius Washington as the backup slot man, and I have Nigel Warrior also making the team. I do not have Chris Westry making the team. Second-year player. He was a UDFA. He spent most of last year on Dallas' practice squad. I think he's a little bit too much of a project. If the Ravens were hurting at cornerback, he'd definitely be a guy to keep, but they're just so loaded at cornerback. I don't see the need for a project. They might be able to flip him. Arizona is in desperate need of corners, apparently.
I have Peters, Smith, Westry, Humphrey, Young, and Averett. They have Washington listed as a safety. I think he's a slot safety kind of hybrid. But
yeah, I had Washington at free safety.
Right. So I'm going to go with 6. I think I think they're going to keep Westry. I think they like the developmental traits. I'm not confident in putting him in a game right now in the regular season. I think that he ultimately flames out, but I think that they're too tantalized by his traits, the speed, the length, and the ball skills that we've seen to break across the ball and undercut passes. I feel like he gets scooped right up, and I feel like DaCosta is not going to want to let him go for nothing. I think that you can kind of dangle him in front of some teams and maybe get a pick out of it or something. And worst case, you've got a developmental corner that's really long. And his problem, I didn't really watch tape on him or anything out of Kentucky, but I read like 10 quick scouting reports, and maybe they're all just copycats. That can happen, but every single one was trouble processing route combos, fails to execute assignments in zone. And those are the things that I've seen in the preseason at times where he kind of just starts to think and then lets someone slip behind him, and then there's a big play coming. And I think that he's not quite refined there. But if you're going to get refined, Baltimore's a good place. You're in a room with Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, and Jimmy Smith, not to mention Tavon Young. And I don't think Anthony Averett's too shabby mentally either. So I think they ultimately keep 6 with Westry and Averett both making it. I think they value that back end. And again, if you burn John Harbaugh and Eric DaCosta, it won't happen again. And I think they saw how desperate they were in Cleveland in the second half of the game after I believe Marcus Peters got banged up. And in Pittsburgh, you've got Devontae Harris playing some corner, and he did well in that game. But I do think they keep 6, and I think that Westry stays.
Yeah, so basically for me and you, it came down to Warrior versus Westry, so I went with Warrior there at left cornerback. Anything else on corner before we jump into these safeties?
Just that's really the debate, right? Warrior versus Westry. I think Warrior brings more on special teams, and as much as we want to diminish that phase, they still need to line up 11 guys on special teams. So I think Warrior, at least according to Jeff Z, Warrior would be poached immediately if he hit the wire too. So that'll be something interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think it's kind of intangibles and what they put on tape versus the tangibles with the length that Westry has. And a lot of the time that length and the physical stuff does win out, but I've got a little hunch that I think they really like Warrior.
I like Warrior better than Westry. I don't think that's what ends up happening, but I certainly like Warrior more. I actually think I like Warrior more than any quote-unquote bubble DB other than maybe Geno Stone. I like Warrior over Washington. I like him over Westry as a player that can be inserted into a defensive team and make an impact. So I hope that is the case.
Yeah, so speaking of safety, we can move there now, and it's interesting, Voss, that you listed Ardarius Washington as a corner, and maybe, in a way I did go with 7 corners because I think Ardarius Washington maybe could or would play both in a pinch. So I had him as the back half of my free safety group. So free safety, I had Deshaun Elliott starting, Brandon Stevens behind him, Ardarius Washington number 3. Wink and nod with Anthony Levine so he doesn't make the strong safety room. I got Chuck Clark and I got Geno Stone, who is listed as a strong safety on their site.
That's exactly what I have also, and I wasn't too high on Stone entering camp, and he performed pretty well. And I think you need a natural safety to play the back end. Stevens is also a little bit of a hybrid kind of guy. So I have Geno making it, and I do have Anthony Levine coming back in time for week 1. He's the glue that holds a special team together. He's the captain of special teams. I think he's more valuable than any of the other special teams only kind of guys.
I went ahead and went with Clark, Elliott, Stone, Stevens, and Washington. It's tough looking at Westry, Washington, and Warrior. Again, I would take Warrior over them. I feel like of them, again, you're examining who goes on waivers and gets poached or doesn't get poached. And I think Washington now has made a couple of people think, oh, wow, he's, the size isn't an issue. So I think he may be a poachable player, and teams might be like, oh, yeah, okay, we didn't want to take the chance now, but now that we've seen a little bit of preseason action, he might be worth a spot, especially if there's, an injury or, he's worth a waiver claim, I think. So I go with Washington to round out. I think that Stone and Stevens are the direct, second unit, with Stone playing more of Elliott's role and Stevens playing more of Clark's role in terms of walking down into the slot and into the box, Stevens, Clark, and then playing a little more single high, Elliott and Stone. And I'll go with Washington. Washington has this tweet out there right now that's throwing us all for a loop. You're not really taking a chance when you knew you was born to win. Still going. So that, to me, that's like, I don't know, 65%.
I think
that means make the team.
And Jerry said on the broadcast, I don't know if it was the most they've ever given to an undrafted free agent in terms of like a guarantee of maybe $100K or something like that. It sounds like they really wanted him on the 90 man, and he's played well enough, I think, to justify 53.
They actually gave Ely $90,000 and $668,000, and then Washington $85,000, $665,000. So hey, maybe Vaz nails Ely and nails Washington there. Ely would not be surprising just because of the tackle situation.
And I might actually do that myself too. Like, speaking of like going with what you're going to do versus what you think is going to happen, I might prefer Ely over somebody like a Cologne or a Macari, but I kind of think that they're going to go that different way. But
I think that they don't want to be stuck with trying to use guards at tackle again, like they were last year again. That's but who knows? I feel like they've done things just a little bit differently this year with some of the special teams guys, letting Jordan Richards go early, letting Devontae Harris go early. So it's all just trying to read between the lines. We'll find out.
Absolutely. Hey, remember read between the lines? That was a huge insult in the early 2000s. So that's 50 players right there, and then it is rounded out by your new Wolfpack with Justin Tucker at kicker, Sam Cook at punter, Nick Moore, your new long snapper there, stepping in for Morgan Cox.
Can they teach Bredesen how to long snap? Is that?
I was gonna say, like I'm doing this this Madden series on YouTube, which you should check out if you haven't already. It's episode 1 aired today. Just kind of doing that for a little bit of fun, and like I'm getting to the final cut downs. Like Nick Moore is like a tight end rated like 38, and I'm like, all right, well I guess I have to keep this guy for like realism purposes, but like this is like, can we figure something else out here?
You'd think for a team that's so interested in gaining the little minor edges wherever they can. I saw, was it Tomlinson? Somebody was doing backup long snaps in the fourth quarter. Anyway.
Well, what they should do is they should just never kick. They should just go on fourth down, like when Cox tore his ACL against the Falcons, and like Haloti was the long snapper, and then on 4th and 9, Flacco threw like a bomb to Torrey Smith and just completely stunted on the Falcons in 2014. That's one of my favorite like random tidbits. And just
was that like Monday Night Football?
No, it was a daylight 1 p.m. Just they blew the NFC South out of the water that year, and I remember being so entertained by that. To this day, I still remember that.
It was 2014, so I'm thinking of 2012. When did they played the Falcons and got the crap kicked? Maybe it was 2008 then. No, so I remember Roddy White kicking the crap.
That was 13, I think.
They played in 08 or 09, and Flacco and Ryan both played really well. It was like a shootout. It was like,
and the Falcons won, right? And
yeah, they did.
Roddy White had like 150 yards or something, and Julio was like a first or second year player, and
it might have been pre-Julio at that point because he came in 2011. But yeah,
it was
a really good game. Yeah,
I remember a Roddy White game, and I remember I was watching in my Hampstead, Maryland. Shout out Greenmount Station, favorite little in-town sports bar there. I remember watching that and just being disgusted by whatever was happening. I just remember Roddy White. That's all I
think it was the Roddy White game because he was filthy at the time. That was like prime Roddy White.
Exactly, when he was balling. So yeah, for me, notable cuts. I had Levine. I think Levine, like Vaz said, can be revisited. I think they do cut him though. I think we see maybe Boykin, and then Nigel Warrior, I guess, is my third one. But like I said, I mean, I'm going with prediction, not what I would do. I like Nigel Warrior the best.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think he's a scrappy kind of guy. It just feels like the kind of guy that they're going to like. Great name. You like a guy named Warrior on your squad. If I could have a Warrior join Baltimore Beatdown, I think I would like that. If we could start kind of, trolling the internet to recruit someone with that last name.
See if he's got any cousins, any uncles, any crazy uncles, any crazy aunts that might want to just like do a Warrior watch every week and write for.
We'll have that be a segment on the podcast, Warrior Watch, where we just check in on Nigel Warrior's stats, which probably not going to be an especially jam-packed segment for at least the first 12 weeks of the year.
For every tackle he makes, we just scream "Warrior, Warrior!"
We do some kind of hopefully non-problematic like chant when he makes a special teams tackle.
Non-problematic, yeah. I think he fits a good special teams profile. He's physical as hell. He likes to come up and make plays in the run game. He can run through some screens and some blocks. But I'm curious to see how this pans out. Again, I do think there is someone out there that is a cut of another team that ends up on this 53. Feels like they're sniffing around and they've got some weird rooms that they need to try and add one more talented player and maybe someone with a little bit of experience.
And it is definitely going to be Todd Gurley.
Probably.
We'll see. My notable cut was Ben Mason, draft pick. I have two UDFAs making the team in Ely and Washington. And the Permutations fee with the wink nod 48-hour break from the team, which pains me to say, but it just makes sense.
Yeah, for me, I want to see Nate McCrary stick around with the practice squad. Liked what I saw from him. I guess Ely would be a notable cut for sort of the way you've been kind of talking him up, Voss. So that was one for me. Miles Boykin obviously would probably be my most notable one. That's not like a wink nod. I've been alluding to the fact that I think probably a little parting of ways is going to be in the fold here for both parties, and we'll see how that works out. I think he is going to get scooped up, and I do expect him to catch on somewhere, at least in some sort of rotational capacity. I think it's going to be unfortunate. I think he's played better at times than people are willing to give him credit for, but I just don't see him having a place with this roster.
David Culley's going to say, Miles Boykin, come on down to Houston.
What the hell is going to happen there?
Him and Nico Collins, the Twin Towers, baby.
Nico, I forgot they got him. They got, I mean, they're just
Kenny
signing.
Stills.
They're signing everyone. They just threw everything at all of their problems, and it's probably not going to work.
How did they do in the preseason? Did the depth pay off or no?
I heard some like crazy Davis Mills buzz.
Well, that was during the draft, right? Or did he play well? You're saying?
No, I'm saying I'm pretty sure I saw some inklings of being like, wow, this Davis Mills kid is like something special.
Did they pick him in the 3rd round?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a reach in my humble estimation.
I think he was my 6th quarterback. He was
just kind of uninspired to me. He just reminds me of like every Pac-12 quarterback that is like, oh, this guy kind of, maybe, and he's just probably not. But we'll see. I like Stanford quarterbacks.
KJ Costello.
Costello I liked, actually.
Yeah.
That was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back.
He ended up in the SEC and then was it Mississippi State or something? I don't remember.
Did he go to Texas Tech maybe? Something like, or yeah, I think it is Mississippi State.
He went to Mississippi State, beat LSU in week 1. Everyone went insane because LSU just won the national championship. And then LSU was like the 8th best team in the SEC.
Oh, wait, Joe Burrow's gone. That's, yeah, maybe.
Oh, wait, all their good players opted out. They lost their offensive coordinator. That's the reason they won the national championship. And, there we go. So
here's games coming up college this week. There's some really good matchups.
Georgia Clemson. That's going to be a barn burn. My boy DJ Ugalele. That's my favorite player in college football. Really like one of my all-time favorite college players, DJ Ugalele.
You've been all over that train, going back to like him getting like late snaps for Trevor Lawrence in certain spots. So I am excited to check him out. I got to get more into college this year. That's always I always say I'm going to do that.
Pick one team from the SEC, the Big Ten, and then one team that is like not Clemson or someone in the either like Big 12 or ACC. Just follow like 3 teams and try and at least check in, and you'll end up seeing so much. Maybe you don't have to watch the full game or anything. Just check in on them, see what's going on.
Maybe I will do Clemson or South Carolina with my Greenville roots. I could pick either one of those. So I'll probably be the hipster and go South Carolina then.
Gamecocks lost a lot of talent. I wouldn't watch them this year.
Yeah, they were always like Clemson was fucking nothing when I was down here. It was all about SC. I think the old ball coach was there at the time. So yeah. So I'll definitely try to do that. SEC, obviously, I'll just go Texas. Hook them. I'm a big Texas guy, so. Obviously that's going to be not in place for another 4 years, but just having a little fun there. So excited about college, excited about this 53-man roster projection. I think it was fun.
It was fun. This is our 3rd annual Hydra or Trident roster episode where it's the boys, Vaz, Jake, and myself. So I hope you guys enjoyed. So here's my final question. Of the bubble players, and I'm going to try and rattle off some. Let's say Tyson, let's say Ben Mason, let's say, Boykin, Ely. If you want to pick another offensive lineman, that's fine. Let's say Jalen Ferguson, Chris Westry, Ardarius Washington, Nigel Warrior. I guess that's good. Who is the one who makes the biggest impact? And I feel like it's kind of easy, Tyson Williams. So if you want to go beyond Tyson Williams, that's fine. Or if you just want to talk about him, but who do you think of these bubble players makes the biggest impact for the Ravens in 2021?
I got a sneaky feeling, and like this doesn't count. I was going to say Tylan Wallace, but because like I have him listed as 6, but like
you can talk about Tylan Wallace if you want.
Yeah, so he was obviously a lock to make the roster. I did have him as my 6th wide receiver. I think they will list Prochet over him, but I just got a sneaky feeling, man, that they're going to be. They're going to be opening the season with injuries at wide receiver, but I just feel like there's going to be a couple games down the stretch where they need a guy with solid hands and just good concentration to come in and make some plays. And I feel like he's going to be a guy who everyone sort of, when they picked Bateman, it was like, oh, well, Bateman's going to be the guy, one of the top guys in year 1. Wallace is going to get some time to develop. I think that's going to be the case, but I think he's going to come on strong and prove people why he was a steal in the 4th round as early as this year.
That's a good pick. He could be starting in week 1.
Yeah.
Week 1, week 2, very real option that he's getting run on the outside, like 20-25 snaps.
I will go with Geno Stone. I'm not sure if he's quite a bubble guy at this point, but I think with the injury to LJ Fort, they're going to be playing a decent amount of dime, and they're going to want to put Chuck Clark down in the box, help communication, let him match up tight ends, support the run. And the man on the back end in that situation is going to be Geno Stone. And I can see him corralling, I don't know, a handful of interceptions this season.
Maybe a pair of picks. Yeah, well, I like it. I like those. I think whether it's Washington or Warrior or Stone, I think one of those guys definitely makes a heavy contribution at some point here.
Dalen Hayes too.
Dalen Hayes, name to watch out for sure. I think he's earned himself some snaps. I think he's shown he can step into the rotation confidently, whether it's as a rusher or someone that just likes to rush, or as a run defender, or someone who can come in on third down, has some mobility, and can play below the waist of offensive tackles and dip under and try and get some of those speed sacks, those quick pressures. So I like those for sure. But yeah, then obviously Tyson Williams going to be thrusted into what feels like a notable role early. So it's interesting to see, and I'm curious to see if there's a player that's not currently in Baltimore that ends up making an impact. I think that whether it's someone who's signed immediately or ultimately that Eric DeCosta trades for, and I believe that is going to happen. I'm very confident in either running back, offensive line, defensive line, or linebacker room someone's brought in here in the next 2 days. Maybe they don't make a huge impact, but I think there's someone out there that will be a heavy rotational player, maybe even a starter, that's going to make a big impact this year. I think there's a lot of weird little rooms and holes and some weird stuff going on right now through this training camp and preseason process. So we shall see, but I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see what happens tomorrow and in the coming days. And this was a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this with me, guys.
Thanks for hopping on and doing it with us. I think this is a fun tradition, as you've been alluding to, and it was great. Voss, thanks for hopping on with us, bud.
The pleasure was mine. The pleasure was mine.
It's always great to have you on. Before we get rolling here, how about you let the listeners know where they can find you and your stuff?
At Vasilis Beatdown on Twitter, Vasilis Beatdown, and I publish a daily Ravens news, or Spencer called it Voss News the other day. Do some links and do some long form pieces occasionally as well at Baltimore Beatdown, our blog.
All right. Well, appreciate that. You can find the show on social media at Podcast Beatdown on Twitter. You can find it at Baltimore_Beatdown_podcast on Instagram. I am at Jake Luke. That is LOUQUE with the white or blue check mark next to the name, regardless of how you kind of perceive that. And then Spencer's at Ravens 4 Dummies. That's the number 4 in the middle there. Also check out at Be More Beatdown for our flagship site's Twitter account, where we tweet out all our great articles and a lot of good analysis from there as well. And go to BaltimoreBeatdown.com for all of us, and Baltimore Beatdown on YouTube for our video content and podcast content too. So this was a fun little 53-man roster projection. We're going to have more for you guys later in the week. We've got a bye week coming up here. There's usually a 4th preseason game to occupy this, but there's not going to be before week 1. So we'll probably have plenty of fun stuff until week 1. But until the next episode, I guess we will see you guys later.
This was so fun, and this reminded me of when we did the 3-man weave NFL draft, like fantasy draft. That was a lot of fun. But that's all for us. See ya.
Arrivederci.
Gorlami. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.